And welcome. Good evening or good morning, depending on which part of the world you are dialing in from. Thank you for tuning in to SF Asia's webinar on San Francisco's biotech ecosystem in partnership with eSingapore. Today, we have speakers from the public and private sectors to share their perspective and experience in our bioeconomy. Housekeeping. Today's program will be recorded, so if you missed anything, you can always check the link you'll be receiving after today's program or visit our website, www.globalsf.biz, for a link to this webinar and a host of other webinars you can reference. During today's panel discussion, you can also send questions. Please post them in the Q&A as you think of any. They will be addressed during the program and not at the end, so you don't have to wait. Before I start the program, I do want to introduce SF Asia. SF Asia is a public-private partnership between Global SF and the San Francisco Office of Economic and Workforce Development under the Mayor's Office in San Francisco. SF Asia is one of 3 targeted regional initiatives that operate to attract companies and investment to San Francisco while helping local companies expand overseas. The targeted regions are China, Latin America, and Asia outside of China. SF Asia works closely with countries in Asia, including the ASEAN countries, their consulates and trade offices to facilitate partnerships and connect businesses with opportunities. Many thanks to the Office of Economic and Workforce Development for their generous support in sponsoring today's event. I'd also like to thank all of our speakers and participants joining us today: Enterprise Singapore, QB3, Lucence Diagnostics, and Edgen Biosciences. Why are we focusing on biotech and life sciences? According to Biocom, in 2020, the Bay Area's life sciences sector generated $159 billion in economic impact, employing more than 179,000 people. Today, we want to raise that awareness and also let you know that you can come to see it firsthand as we host our first post-pandemic in-person Select USA spinoff in San Francisco on June 30th at QB3 at Backer Labs, UC Berkeley. The program will be focused on biotech and life sciences and will be an all-day event from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. with an after-event reception scheduled from 4 to 6 p.m. See the link in the chat below. Life sciences and biotech in particular is a booming industry, especially in the Bay Area. We are very excited to welcome our speakers today who will dive deeper into the ecosystem in the Bay Area and may be able to help give insight to navigating your business to San Francisco. I would like to start by introducing Mr. Delon To, Regional Director of Enterprise Singapore, to give remarks. Delon.
Thanks, Darlene. Yeah. Good morning and good evening, everyone. My name is Delon, and I'm the Regional Director in Enterprise Singapore's US office. First and foremost, we'd like to express our deepest appreciation to Global SF and the City of SF for organizing this so that we can gather and talk about how Singapore companies can access the very rich resources found in the Bay Area. As you all know, the US boasts the world's largest healthcare industry, and SF ranks first in investment for devices, tools, and health tech. For Singapore companies, the Bay Area is definitely a priority hub to consider, and US will likely be a key reference and commercialization market, as well as a source for strategic funding opportunities. Hence, it is my pleasure to have 2 of our most pioneering and successful Singapore companies, Lucence Diagnostics and Edgen Biosciences, join us in this discussion with very experienced panelists from City of SF and QB3. I truly hope that today's session will generate fresh insights, spark new interest to come to the US, and explore further. With that, I wish everyone a great session and fruitful discussion ahead.
Thank you, Delon. Really great remarks. And I forgot to introduce myself, I realized. My name is Darlene Chu Bryant. I am the founder and executive director of Global SF, and I'm so excited and delighted we're having this program today. And with that, I would like to introduce Mark Chandler, Director of International Affairs, City and County of San Francisco. Mark.
Darlene, thank you very much, and good evening to everybody in the Bay Area, and good morning to those across the Pacific. On behalf of our Mayor, London Breed, it's my honor to join this discussion today, both by giving some welcome remarks, but also to be part of the panel as we move forward. As Darlene pointed out, why are we talking about biotechnology? Well, biotechnology is one of the leading sectors in our city of San Francisco and, of course, in the Bay Area. And I've been around a long time, as Darlene well knows, and can date back to the days when we did not have a Mission Bay. When San Francisco did not have a biotech industry, it was obviously very successful in the region, but not in our city, even though we were the home to UCSF, which many will call the birthplace of biotechnology. That, of course, has changed over the last 20 years. And I think there's some interesting lessons and results that we can discuss today as we look to the future. I'd also like to thank Mr. To Delon from Enterprise Singapore for being here today and being part of the organizing committee of this. San Francisco and Singapore have an extremely close relationship. I've worked with the Consulate General of Singapore many, many times over the years. And I think that relationship is just deepening day by day now. I personally know a number of American companies that have basically made Singapore their new Asian headquarters. And I think we're going to see the relationship between our city and region and Singapore deepen in many areas, but especially in these areas of smart economy, of those that are innovative and take the smart thinkers of the world, such as biotechnology and other tech sectors. I think we're going to see even more depth to the relationship between our city and your city and country. So thank you, Delon, for being here. And a special thanks to the other experts that are here. I'm always humbled when I'm joined by such luminaries in their field and look forward to hearing their words. I'll just say two things. The city of San Francisco is back. COVID obviously, hit everybody down for a couple of years, but the city is back. It's up, it's running. Our unemployment is at 2% now. It was at 12% about 2 years ago. Obviously, there's issues still with that work-home hybrid balance. But San Francisco is back. We have dozens and dozens of programs for economic stimulus going on right now. And we think the future is going to be very, very bright for our city to continue as the innovation center for not only the United States, but we think for the world. And this conference and forum that we're having today is an important part of that structure of keeping us as a center of innovation and creating those global ties, which are so important. So again, on behalf of the mayor and the city of San Francisco, Darlene and all who are here today, thank you very much and look forward to an interesting discussion.
Thank you so much, Mark. And it's good to know, and it's also good for our audience to hear that we are very bullish about the future and that definitely San Francisco is open for business again. And now I'm pleased to introduce Bruce Pickering, Senior Policy Advisor to Global SF, as today's moderator. Bruce, you can take it away.
Thank you, Darlene. It's great to sort of have this conversation as a bit of a precursor to the Select USA discussion. And indeed, this is an area that we've gotten progressively at Global SF, have gotten progressively more interested in. And I think it's an area that, it sort of fits neatly within the region's approach towards innovation, technology, and kind of looking ahead at the next things to come. And to join us today for this conversation, we've got a great group. So Mark Chandler, I asked Mark to stay on board because I too have known Mark for a long time, and he's been a kind of one of the major international players in this, both the city and the region, and has a lot of expertise. And one of the important areas that sometimes is overlooked is the relationship between technology and technology companies and the public and the people who actually live here. And it's not as comfortable as I think a lot of people might think. And so Mark is a kind of adept at navigating that and explaining it. I have Jack Shallis, the Senior Vice President of U.S. Operations for Lucence Diagnostics. Thank you very much for joining us. Jeffrey Liu, the founder and CEO of Engine Biosciences. And then I have David Schaefer, who's the incoming director of QB3. He starts on July 1st, replacing the legendary Reg Kelly, who will speak as well as David, I think, at our conference on June 30th. So David will do it via a link from Turkey, from Istanbul. So I'm going to start with a variety of questions, and anybody, including our panelists, should feel free to pose questions or respond directly. I think it's much more fun to have this as a conversation rather than simply, everybody talking. And I the first question is a pretty basic one, but I think it provides a good foundation for the discussion to follow, which is essentially one of why this area, why has biosciences taken off here, biotech taken off here in a way that I think is kind of the envy of many other parts of the country. What is it that made this place, kind of what it is? And it seems to me that I think I should probably start with David first and just ask him, because I think he's part of the answer. And then I thought I would also ask Jeffrey to follow up as well from his perspective. So David, what started this all, and why are we where we are today?
Sure. I guess I would say, and forgive me if I'm saying this from a way in which is perhaps perceived to be biased, being an academic, but I think that the presence of, high-powered universities, dating back 150 years in the case of Berkeley, probably contributed to the beginnings of the ecosystem, since there was an extremely well-trained workforce as well as a flow of knowledge and technology. Obviously, many additional critical components have assembled to create the ecosystem we have now, where there's incredibly high-powered academics, medical schools, biotech, pharma, tech, legal, business, as well as VC, as well as finance, all in the same 50-mile radius. And that is, as a result, a very powerful formula. I do think that academia continues to make contributions to that by supplying extremely well-trained people, not only in STEM but also business law and other disciplines. And it perhaps can't go unnoticed that there have been several high-powered Nobel Prizes given in areas that are really important for the bioeconomy over the past few years. Really what has driven the NASDAQ Biotech Index all the way up until several months ago, there was around a 12-month steady climb, is, genome editing, gene therapy, and cancer immunotherapy. And Nobel Prizes in 2 of those areas were awarded to investigators for work that was done in the Bay Area in academia over the past 5 years or so. So in other words, it's, we're very lucky to be at the confluence of cutting edge entities across multiple sectors, and hopefully academia can continue to make its contributions as well.
Thank you. Jeffrey, what's your perspective as an entrepreneur and a founder of a company that works in this area? Nice background, by the way.
Find very attractive.
Uh-oh.
I would say I think fundamentally we start with the fact that there is a dramatic amount of a need from patients for new medicines, and fundamentally that's driven off innovation, right? So that needs to come up from academia, needs to come from kind of biotech companies, and needs to come also from pharma companies. And I think in the Bay Area we have all 3 of those. I think the other element that we're particularly excited by is we kind of track what is going to change the flow of kind of new medicines to patients, to the market. It's really a current kind of paradigm shift that's happening in the industry to leverage new technologies, some of which David described, but using technologies, using really leveraging on data science, et cetera. Those things we think stand a great great chance to make a difference. And clearly, those are the areas where the Bay Area has built up kind of a unique confluence of ingredients between the technology and the biopharma industry to, I think, make a real impact. And so I think that's why generally biotech is really exciting, because there's kind of some real game-changing, I think, shifts happening in the next couple of decades. And I think this area is really poised to be at the epicenter of that.
Interesting. Jack, do you want to add to that before we basically
I think one important thing to highlight is that if you don't have these key ingredients, if you don't have innovative people, if you don't have a culture of building companies, if you don't have, one thing that's very famous about Northern California is with non-competes, people can change jobs much easier than other parts of the country, famously. If you can't move these ideas around, you're not going to be able to build high quality companies. And I think part of the reason it's not true in other places that you might name is often those are lacking. They're lacking the strong universities. They're lacking the seasoned workforce. You know, many of the reasons companies are very successful in the Bay Area is that you can find executives and scientists who have meaningful work experience in other companies similar that have done this before. And I think that, you know, cluster effect that people, you know, work in one generation of biotech innovations and then they go to the next generation of biotech innovations and that leads to the next generation, that's very hard to replicate elsewhere. And once you get, you know, the engine running, you get the momentum, it's just much easier to do the next thing in a place where you have all those pieces versus building up the infrastructure from scratch.
Can I ask a follow-on question, not just of you, Jack, but Jeff, David, or Mark? How do you see it relating to the other industries that have emerged out of this area? I mean, I think everybody sort of touched on it, but you know, it is not the same thing as information technology, and yet my suspicion is that all these pieces actually fit together, and I wonder if this sort of this force multiplier is critical towards the success of biotech. I wonder if somebody could give us a little bit of an insight into that.
I'll jump in. I mean, I think certainly compared to other places I've seen in the US that you might come to mind, from a very early period, the Bay Area has been focused on commercializing technology ideas. And so, you know, you can look at like Terman and at Stanford Research Park and Varian, and I mean, that was 1945. So you have 70 odd years in a range of technologies, which included medical devices and semiconductors, and obviously Genentech supercharged that, you know, but the first investors in Genentech had made their money in semiconductors, right? And so, you know, having that experience of, you know, risk capital and working with industry experience to build, you know, massively scalable technologies to market, you know, plays, you know, has real momentum. And I think also, you know, there's a certain gold rush mentality here that, you know, that we're gonna find our way to the load, whatever it takes. And I think Jerry Brown used to joke that, like, you know, Californians are all descended from these gold rush settlers, and so there's a certain boom bust culture built into that. And I think, you know, biotech feeds into that. That, you know, that if you have 50 shots on an opportunity, you're much more likely to get one that's really successful and really drives, versus if you have just a much smaller number of bets. And I think that willingness to take risks, knowing that, you know, things might go south, leads to, you know, successes that are substantially factors above, you know, where you would get with more modest guesses, with more modest bets.
Mark, you mentioned that you've seen it all, and I'm wondering, actually, I'd love to get your perspective on this, because you've been here and seen the whole, you know, growth of the industry. So
yeah, I agree totally with what Jack just said. I mean, you know, I'm not a biotech specialist, so I'm not going to get into the technical aspects of it, but I think he hit on the, you know, the risk culture that we have in the Bay Area, which is throughout any of the innovative sectors. And, you know, that is something that just can't be replicated anywhere else. And I think another key, and one, of course, is a government that we work very hard on, is welcoming, is inclusivity, is in diversity. And that, you know, the San Francisco Bay Area is able to attract the best and the brightest from every corner of the world, and that they come here and they feel pretty welcome here. They're able to, they bring their families, and pretty soon their friends are coming, etc. And we take that for granted here, but that's not the case in much of the world or in much of the country. And so I think, you know, some of these factors that maybe aren't so technical as venture capital funding and the fact that without the universities, none of this exists. I agree with that. Or some of these other aspects. And I think the risk culture, number one, and two, the fact that we don't really care where you're from, right? That's the old line. We don't care where you're from. We care what you're doing. Really does permeate the Bay Area, and that is different than most places.
Jeffrey, do you see like, I mean, David really referred to this, and I asked you a little bit, but do you see a through line between the academic element and that, you know, this ability to monetize? And if so, how does that happen in a way that is so efficient?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can speak to our company. I think the foundation of what, you know, Engine's technology platform of science really does draw from academic collaborations, licenses with our scientific founders, collaborators. In the Bay Area, we're close with folks at UCSF, and so from the very beginning of our days. So absolutely, I think the efficiency and how does it happen? It's not. I think a lot of this is. A lot of this is part of this is kind of benefiting from kind of structured programs. I think like more formalized interactions between universities, tech transfer offices, and companies or entrepreneurs. For us, it was much more organic. I mean, these are a company was born out of relationships that were built over the last 5-10 years, starting from when our founders were in the academic labs or doing their PhDs together or postdocs together, and everyone stayed in touch as things developed over time and technologies got mature. And there's just kind of natural points in which the conversation gets struck up to say, maybe it makes time to spin out a company. Or then following up on that, when we have, the ability then to kind of tap into the networks that were formed and organically build, our SAB, organically kind of build, future collaborations. I think that's what makes an area like San Francisco and the Bay Area really special, in that there is that constant kind of interplay and dialogue between great investigators and academics and companies. It's not like there's a barrier that's been put in between. Because of the culture, it's very natural for those conversations to be happening, oftentimes before there's even a company, and so that those connections are really foundational for what happens after a company is formed and even grows and gets to a later stage. And there continues to be that strong kind of feed between the kind of risk capital and development capabilities that industry brings with kind of the innovation and research and technology development that I think academia is really well positioned to be providing.
Well, interesting. So David, one of the things that I see in your incoming role in QB3, and certainly with Baker Biotechnology Hub, BBH, is in fact the university now becoming an active player in this, not just serving as a research platform, but now actually essentially trying to drive it, at least to some degree, I think. Can you give us a bit of an oversight into that? As how does this happen, and why is the university now becoming more of an active participant as opposed to a passive research facility?
Yeah, I think different universities had different starting points dating back, let's say 15 years or so. My alma mater, Stanford, was always pretty good at spitting out companies, right? Berkeley, culturally speaking, was quite different, and probably there are a lot of schools that are somewhere in between. Berkeley was, very fundamental, very basic science, and I think at my university, as well as others, professors trained graduate students to become professors, right? Whereas in reality, there are a lot of other paths where one can contribute extremely meaningfully to society. So there has been a cultural shift within a number of universities where people recognize that patenting is not something that is antithetical to academic freedom. And in fact, patenting is a way of really increasing the chances that a discovery that you have made can have an impact on society. Because for it to do so, it needs to end up in a company and there needs to be an investment in it. And for that to happen, there has to be intellectual property protection for it. So I've, for the first 14 years I was at Berkeley, I didn't form a single company. In the past 8, I've started 8 companies. 2 have been acquired. The other 6 are alive and kicking and growing. So I think that's just reflective of a lot of my colleagues who've begun to recognize that, sure, we're going to continue to publish and to train people, and professors are going to come out of our groups. But one of the other really meaningful ways that we can really extend on and build upon the mission of the university to have a positive impact on society is to increase the chances that technologies that are created on the campus are able to make that successful jump into a company, because that jump needs to happen in order for a discovery to solve societal problems. You know, companies are the ones that translate basic discoveries into solutions to societal problems. And you know, that it's both the professors, it's the students, it's the university, it's the legal infrastructure around the university that's increasingly making this possible to happen and encouraging it.
Interesting. So, okay, so this has all been focused at this point on kind of the basics of how it founded and how we got it off the ground. You know, the fact that the Bay Area now is one of the leading, if not it is the leading center for innovation in the biotechnology sphere. But I guess the question now is, we all know, and it's certainly a problem with the overall tech industry, is that creates its own set of problems. And it also leads every other place on the planet that has any kind of a base to want to, you know, kind of steal the secret sauce, try to create their own version of what is now here. And so a couple of questions, and I actually see Mark now in a bit of a role as kind of explaining kind of the policy elements, because that's critical. You can't have this in isolation. And he pointed out, for example, the non-compete clause and things that, actually maybe it was Jack who did that, but I think there are a lot of regional characteristics we have, but they're not all germane just to the Bay Area. And so I think a question here is, what really matters? What keeps us in the forefront? Maybe Jack, if you could start, but I'll ask everybody to this and then ask Mark to kind of you know, play cleanup on it.
Yeah, I think there's there's a lot of pieces, right? And I think first off, you know, what we're all describing is a very fragile, beautiful thing, right? You know, in terms of a place where these things are able to be very successful, it's very easy to break that. Okay, it's not hard. But I mean, like, if you go to South San Francisco and you see all the, you know, lab space that is rolling out, and the you know, the ability to get good zoning, and the ability to you know, meet the transportation needs of a growing company, the ability to you know, support a good, you know, the San Francisco airport having connections to make it very easy to move logistics around. I mean, the more of these boxes you check, the harder it is for some place that maybe, you know, looks a lot better on one of those lists, but can't quite compete on the others, can match. And I think it really is the whole package that makes it powerful. And to the extent that, you know, you are able to get good talent and access to investors and access to a vendor supply network that's very, very robust, it just makes everything easier.
Cool. Jeffrey, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the you know, one thing we think a lot about is kind of the is very much talented people, right? Because fundamentally, you just need to make sure that the people are there to help build and translate and build the companies that we're all excited to try to do in the area. So I think to the extent that, you know, we could broaden out and think about, you know, even things we talked about. Yeah, I think Jack was talking about transportation things, but, you know, various types of kind of infrastructure policies that make the Bay Area continue to be a really attractive place for talent to be and to stay and want to build their lives and careers. Then that's ultimately going to be really beneficial for us in the future. And obviously, as you get more and more activity, the challenge is obviously, you know, costs and other things kind of rise, and, you know, there's a finite amount of physical space. But I think that really is something that we think a lot about, and hoping that there continues to be a lot of you know, good work to make the area really attractive for the best talent of the world.
So even though you're basically saying, even though the costs are extraordinarily high, I think, comparatively speaking with other parts of the country, there's still an element of things here that you can find here that it's just really hard to find elsewhere. Is that what I'm kind of basically hearing here?
Yes. Yeah, there's I mean, the other obviously competitor is Boston, that has the same confluence of, you know, pharma, incredible pharma, biotech, hospitals, academia. You know, Boston has You're probably familiar with the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center, where Boston or Massachusetts as a whole decided to invest $100 million per year in programs to be able to stimulate the bioeconomy within the state. And I'm sure you've all walked through One Kendall Square. It's late at night and you wouldn't want to be trapped there whatsoever 15 years ago. And now it's a bustling biotech center. And they've done a lot to really stimulate that. And then, that's something that perhaps we could replicate in California. It's certainly, we are the birthplace of the biotech industry, and certainly an investment in that industry can benefit not just the Bay Area, but also the Central Valley, if that ends up being something that can stimulate biomanufacturing in other places within the state. One additional advantage Boston has, of course, is that the way of course, that the biotech economy works is that technologies are developed within small biotechs. The ones that are truly successful get acquired by the pharma companies, so the Genentechs and Chirons, et cetera. And so pharma companies are ultimately, major drivers through M&A of the biotech industry. And a lot of the pharma companies are, of course, based in Europe, and it's a shorter plane flight to Boston relative to San Francisco. So they have that unfair advantage relative to us, but there's still a huge amount of advantages within the Bay Area and Boston that are going to be difficult to replicate in many other places in the country.
Interesting. Mark, as you hear about this, actually, let me ask David one follow-on question. David, as I understand it, the Boston initiative or the Massachusetts initiative has actually returned more than its cost. I mean, they've actually made money by investing that $100 million a year. If I understand correctly, they've actually been very successful with that.
Yes, my colleague at QB3, Reg Kelly, has really been active in this area, both in researching what Massachusetts has done really well as potentially developing models where we can emulate that within the state of California. But certainly by all accounts, that's been a highly successful program where, through loans and tax breaks and, investment in academia, and not just in the premier universities, but in some of the, outlying communities to stimulate manufacturing as development in those areas that would, of course, benefit the companies that are in Cambridge. It's been a very successful program that has led over, 10 years plus to Boston really becoming increasingly well regarded in this area. I think San Francisco is still an amazing place. This is my home, but I think we have something to learn as well from the East Coast.
Mark, what do you think?
Well, knowing Reg and that spending a lot of time when Reg Kelly would be talking to Gavin Newsom, my former boss, Darlene's former boss, as mayor, I hope he has that pipeline open to the governor at this point too. My guess is he does. So maybe we'll see something coming out of that. I mean, I think from the city of San Francisco's perspective, we look at why are we successful as an innovation city, and it comes down to all the things that people have asked or talked about today, but it also comes down, and Jeff, you said this, it's talented workforce that can live and work anywhere in the world. And so you better focus on the quality of life in your city, in your region. And so that's our challenge. And of course, the biggest challenge right now is housing. Okay, that's just number one. Are we going to become a place that's just too damn expensive? And as you've seen, that's what the focus of so much legislation in Sacramento, and especially in our city. I think our mayor now has yesterday rolled out another affordable housing initiative, $67 million. We're going to really have to focus on that to make sure that we can keep people here. Everybody's in this industry is doing very well, but still those are challenges that face the young people today is housing. So that's a big issue for us at the city in all areas, but especially as we think about the future and the fact that we've got to be attracting and keeping the talented people here. And of course, we continue to look at infrastructure. I actually worked on getting Swiss Air into San Francisco to serve between Genentech and their home base in Switzerland. And we continue to do that to try to make sure that we have global linkages. We know how important those are. And so we work on that on a daily basis. And again, we continue to push diversity, welcoming, having those from around the world come and be welcome in our city and our region. So we look at those aspects of it. We can't get involved in the technical and scientific aspects, but we think what's the quality of life aspects? That's where we have to really focus. If we don't pay attention to those, then you know, Boston wins, right? Or other areas of this of the country will win.
So Jeffrey and Jack, what should Mark be doing that he's not doing right now to keep those companies here in San Francisco? Sorry, Mark, I just couldn't help myself.
It's quite all right, Bruce. Quite all right. Yeah.
Well, I think, one comment, which certainly biotech won't be the only to say this, is that if you want to set up a lab, certainly in San Francisco, but in the Bay Area as a whole, the number of places where you can actually convert lab space is pretty few. And I mean, if you're doing reasonably innovative things and you need to to do, say, biosafety level 2 and above, there's just not a lot of good places that you can go. And yes, you can get 20,000 square feet in South San Francisco, but many small innovative companies need a lot less than that to prove out and to grow from little itty bitty companies to medium-sized companies. So I see a lot of challenges in getting high quality lab space available. And I can give one example that we did. We were around Mission Bay looking for lab space, and I don't know, I toured a couple places, and the Warriors took over this really nice lab space for a price point that we certainly could never afford. They were clearly able to price out, but that made us have to look a lot further down the peninsula because we just couldn't find something to our spec. So I guess to the city, more lab space is good, and I mean, I don't know how to do that or where to do it, but I think that zoning problem is something that we faced directly.
Actually, I think that's a really interesting point, because one thing you still see going downtown San Francisco is there's a lot of space. I mean, my son works at Salesforce, and I think he told me that there are barely 10 to 15% of the workforce is actually in the tower. So maybe others have higher, but I still think, I'm guessing that there's a lot of unused office space right now that, while it would be expensive to convert, might need to be converted, or at least could be a possible solution. So
that discussion has already started, Bruce, because it's pretty obvious to everybody that we're going to a hybrid work model and that there aren't going to be the need for huge floor plates in the future, business back office or office floor plates. And so I'm not privy to them, but I've heard of them, and I know colleagues that are involved, that there's already discussion going on about how to convert those floor plates into other aspects. Some people are looking at them for housing, which is really hard to do. But there has been talk too, how can we take these into the biotech or other arenas? So I think that's something that we're going to see becoming a rather interesting discussion over the next probably year or two.
And I think the Baker Biotech Hub does that, right? That is the mission of Baker, if I understand it correctly.
Yes. So the East Bay, of course, is I mean, South City obviously is a preeminent place for biotech within the Bay Area. The East Bay has been, slowly catching up in some ways. We lacked incubator space for a good amount of time. There was certainly Emeryville, which had biotech space, with Chiron, which is now Grifols space, and Wareham and Newmark had been developing. There was a lack of incubator space, so on the Berkeley campus, we recognized that was an opportunity, and QB3 worked together with Berkeley and a foundation to invest philanthropic funds to open up what's now a renovated building, which was actually ironically an art museum, into what's now a 40,000 square foot biotech incubator, where we're going to house 50 companies at steady state. So that's it was interesting to us that the concept of an entity that can funnel basic university discoveries into companies that then invest to be able to solve societal problems was viewed as worthy of a significant philanthropic investment or a philanthropic gift to the campus. But I'm director of that incubator. We're up and running now since last November. have 20 companies onboarded, and look forward to hitting our steady state within a few months. And we're also, of course, looking, we anticipate that companies are going to spend an average of 2 times within, or 2 years rather, within the incubator space, which means that we need to be able to find them soft landings to graduate from our space. So we are reaching out to East Bay developers to, determine whether we can make it easier for them to be able to move on to larger space. But certainly more square footage is still currently needed in the East Bay.
Jeffrey, what would you add to this? Or would you just agree with everybody?
Yeah. Well, I certainly echo it. Just thinking about our startup journey, we started first in Mission Bay itself, an incubator space. Then we quickly had to move down to San Carlos, and now we're setting up our own space in Redwood City with our own lab. And whether it's kind of what's finding the incubator space, or ultimately trying, doing the search for our own site where we scoured across the bay, East Bay, Peninsula. There still aren't that many options, and so these are like 6 to 12 month processes to try to get just identify spaces. And we operate at 18, 24, 36 month cycles as a startup, right? So I think it's those are challenges. I mean, the other thing I would just say is just an earlier point is what can be done. I think again it goes down to people, and I think about what our people who are either we're looking to recruit or with the company or talk to us about. They talk about the increasing cost of living. They're talking about the decreasing attractiveness of being in the city for various reasons. Part of it is because there is the remote flexibility, and people want to leverage that, and I think that's happening certainly beyond any particular geography. But part of it is that we just need to make sure the city in particular, given that's the topic discussed here, but the general Bay Area continues to be like a great place for people to set up their lives. Like they feel like education, their cost of living, their quality of life, their safety, etc. They feel is great, and I think I don't have any kind of I know these are very complex issues, and obviously there's a lot of things that play into this, but I just think that's probably the biggest thing. If the best people in the world want to be in San Francisco and the Bay Area, as historically has often been the case, then we're just naturally going to see a lot of great things come out of that. Conversely, if there's an outflow, that's over the long term, I think we will unfortunately suffer from that.
Well, that's actually interesting, since all of you basically have talked a bit about this, and it's interesting because you have the intellectual property side, the actual biosciences element, and the relationship with the universities. But both you and Mark, and I think Jack and David have also talked about the quality of life. You can work anywhere. You could be in Texas or Maine or Alaska and still work, and yet there's something compelling about it. But your point, Jeffrey, is a good one. I mean, you're basically saying we're here, we love it, but we're a little worried about, if I'm hearing right, education, especially probably K through 12, crime, homelessness. These are all issues that the region's confronting and needs to address as a part of this broader package of keeping companies kind of wanting to come to the Bay Area. And it's something I know in my conversations with Mark and with Darlene, we've talked about, is what a critical issue it's and how difficult it is. I mean, it's something we sort of see all the time. So thank you for that. Any other thoughts here before we move to a kind of another topic? Okay, Jack, I actually have a couple questions for you, because I believe, if I understand correctly, Lucence is a Singapore-based company, right?
We are a Singaporean company. So we're, I think we're everything you'd want from a Singaporean success story. Started from a very close group set of researchers at A*STAR, commercialized the technology, proved it out in a model in Singapore, looked to commercialize to global markets, found the right kind of pieces, and then look to expand across the US. And we had lots of options of where to go, and I think we felt the Bay Area maximized our chances of success as a Asian biotech startup.
So one observation and two questions for you. The observation is that David mentioned that Boston has this inherent advantage of being closer to Europe, which I get, Switzerland in particular, but Sweden, Britain, they all have their own tech industries, but we're closer to Asia, right? And isn't that cool? I mean,
That direct flight to Singapore is a big competitive advantage, I will say. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's very true that we move people all the time across, and being able to make that easy. I mean, we don't just move people, we also move stuff, and that it is just easier to get to Southeast Asia from here compared to the East Coast. And I don't know. I've been traveling to Asia for a long, long time, and I've spent a lot of sleepy afternoons in Narita Airport that I'd rather not from here out. So I think there is a value in that. There's proximity, but there's also cultural proximity. I mean, like, the food's better here, right? I mean, there's a lot. I mean, it's just better. That makes it easier if staff are coming from Singapore to the US, to help grow our diverse, rich, knowledge-driven economy. It's a much more comfortable place to live.
Hey, Mark, you can take improving San Francisco's food opportunities off the list. That's
Okay.
Apparently, we got that one.
We got that. And yeah, and when I worked on that direct flight to Singapore, both by Singapore Air and United too, it's 16 and a half hours, long flight, but it beats the hell out of any transfer through Incheon or Narita. So glad that's working.
I wanted Mark here to take a victory lap, because he's done so much for the city of San Francisco, which actually I'm actually not kidding about that. He really has actually been a huge player in this discussion. So I do actually thank you for that, Mark. It's been fun working with you on this stuff. So Jack, here's a tougher question. I didn't give you any heads up this is coming, but what you were saying was really interesting to me. So in Singapore, you have a much more state-focused innovation, environment. Singapore is it's a fascinating country because it's probably the most efficient place on the planet, but nothing really happens in Singapore without some level of government participation or kind of movement in the direction of oversight. How does that compare to this region, and how did that work?
I mean, there's different. I mean, I think every place has its own vibe. I mean, certainly Singapore has many successes entrepreneurially. I mean, Razer is a good example. Razer didn't have a lot of government support, and it's a world leader. And and I think if there's other Singaporean biotech companies that have found strong success with strong linkages to the universities. I mean, to the extent that the major Singaporean universities are public, I guess that's the government, but it's no more than Berkeley is a government agency. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think one thing that makes Singapore a little bit special is, like, city government, state government, and federal government are kind of the same, and that allows for a strategic alignment that can be tricky in other places. But I feel it, they I don't know, whatever investments in real estate in Fusionopolis have led to a critical mass of people and of not just from Singapore, but from the region, ASEAN region, who come and work. I mean, certainly at Lucent's, I would say we don't just have the top scientists from Singapore, we certainly have top scientists from Myanmar and top scientists from Malaysia. And I mean, I think, being a place where you can integrate these top minds and give them world-class tools where they can build great technology, you're well on your way to something really special.
Excellent. Well, then one last question for you before we move on. What lessons do you think the Bay Area could learn from Singapore? I mean, is there anything we could pick up from Singapore? And
I think there's always things. I mean, the income tax rate. I think there's a lot of support for training staff. I mean, I think that's something the Bay Area could definitely look at is these government grants to build human capital. I think we all know that, particularly in biotech, but other industries as well, if you learn a set of skills in college, the odds that that will take you through your entire career are pretty slim. So having ways to take staff that say have some set of competencies, say soft skills, and build new hard competencies in emerging areas like next generation sequencing, that helps build a more flexible workforce. And I think, like the Ministry of Manpower in Singapore has done a really good job of thinking about how do you make a dynamic, flexible workforce to a changing market needs. So I think that's one very good thing. And then I think a second thing is just, if it's clean and safe and the schools are nice, and you have a nice, comfortable life, you're able to make long-term investments in a geography, and that long-term investments in geography doesn't just pay off in this company, but allows, hey, when we're starting the next thing, well, I worked with this person previously and they're still around. And I think that that has a big effect, that if you can find talented people, not just at a point in time, kind of this posse that can help you, reassemble the Lego blocks to whatever that challenge might be, it gives you that dynamic flexibility that's really, really important in a technology cluster.
Interesting. So just one point to our audience is that if you have questions, you should definitely let us know. But I'd kind of like to move here. So we started out with the foundation of what creates the conditions necessary for the rise of such an interesting discussion or an interesting industry. And then we moved to kind of what do we need to do to maintain the sort of status as a front runner that the Bay Area has. I think now the next question, and again, this very much ties into the Select USA conference at the end of June, is the question of where are we going to go with this? What do you see as the sort of future of the biotech and biosciences industry? So I'll just start with Jeffrey actually, and just say, where would you say from your perch, Jeffrey, that you would see things going?
Yeah, I think that this can relate to some things I was leading off with. I think we set up Engine with the technology kind of enabled approach to new targets for new therapeutics, and part of this because we think there's an immediate need for better drugs in the pipeline. Partly because we think we're part of a dramatic shift in the way that pharmaceuticals are being discovered, developed, and hopefully in a more efficient manner. By leveraging a bunch of new tools that have come out over the past decades, they're now coming to a point where they're to a point of maturity, and I think that's very promising for the broader biotech industry, because I think what that means is, the foundation of what will make the industry successful and grow is that we ultimately, through relatively long development cycles and a lot of money, get to a point where we have new drugs kind of helping patients, and the more tools that have come into place, the influx of capital from classical U.S. sources, but from other geographies, including Singapore, I think that's really helpful. The keen interest from all around the world and from people wanting to dive into this, whether they're kind of pure scientists or even people we see in our company that are kind of moving over from the tech industry into wanting to be in biotech and pharmaceuticals, because we think this is going to be really impactful. I think all bodes very well for the future of biotech. I think the measure of success for biotech is not measured in in quarters. It's definitely it's probably measured really in decades. And I think this is something that we feel very bullish about in terms of where all the tech trends and capital and talent pools and also government kind of policies from all around, from different places in the world, are really going to be strong tailwinds for the industry. That's why we're excited about being in this for our careers.
Interesting. Mark, do you want to, where do you think this is going to go?
Well, I agree 1,000% with Jeffrey. I mean, to me, the biotech and biomed industry is a jewel of the Bay Area. And I think people are finally realizing that. And I think maybe COVID brought some of that when we saw development of a RNA vaccine. And believe me, I'm not a technician. I don't know all about that. But when you read about that and you see how amazing and quickly that was done, I think people understand that deep medical research is incredibly important to everybody's life. And so I think, and the other thing I wanted to note is as Jeffrey was talking about global ties and things, I can't tell you how many delegations from every corner of the world have come through San Francisco and City Hall, from head of state levels down to city levels, and they all want to talk about biotech. And every city and country in the world is focused on biotech. And so I think San Francisco and the Bay Area's advantage is we have these global ties more than any other city in the United States, in my opinion. And so I think one, just the rising interest in this industry by the general population, and I'll say I'm one of those, along with the great global ties that we have here and that we work daily to expand. I think biotech has a very bright future, and I think it'll be even a bigger jewel for our Bay Area.
Jack, what do you think?
I think it's a fragile, beautiful thing, right? I think we have many things that a lot of other biotech areas don't have. We have engines of new ideas. We have little bitty incubating companies. We have medium-sized companies. We have big companies. And that healthy ecosystem, like other healthy ecosystems, need to make sure that we make sure that all the resources that flow to make it continue to happen, and we, it's built on good people. It's built on these other pieces. And I think, whatever we can do to make it easier to bring good people to the Bay Area, to make it that companies that want to grow can do it, without having to, go out to Stockton or whatever. I mean, like, whatever we can do to make that happen is going to, on margin, be good for some portion of this. And I think the story I always learned in college was, if you have an ecosystem with frogs in it and you take out the frogs, it's not like the frogs are just gone. It's like you've completely changed everything. All the relationships are new. It's not the same. And so I think for the Bay Area, it's to appreciate this ecosystem depends on a lot of these kinds of things. And if you take away X, you might lose a lot more than you think. And if you want to keep it growing, how can we make it a little bit easier for everybody to do, to keep this beautiful thing going?
Thank you. David, actually, I got to say, oh, hold on. We have a question here. So before I give you the last word, I actually see a question. It says, and I will ask David, and it's an unfair question because David and I kind of talked about this in reference to this upcoming conference we're putting together. But before I do, we do have a question. And since I'm so excited to have one question, I'm going to ask it, which is, what are the gaps and challenges in biotech industries in Singapore and the Bay Area? Are they similar or different, and how do they both collaborate? We kind of talked about that. I don't know what time this came in, but I think, Jack, you're probably the right person to answer that question.
Yeah, I think together they're much stronger than apart. I mean, I think one thing that the Bay Area does very, very well is take ideas from kind of medium size to big. And so I think that lack of a ceiling helps a lot. I think, in Singapore, one thing I've observed of the biotech industries in Singapore is that there are lots of good people. There's lots of good infrastructure. The laws are easy to understand. The airport's amazing. That's all good. But when a company kind of gets to a good sized idea, going from that sort of medium sized idea to a big idea, I think that piece just isn't there yet. Not that it couldn't be, that it isn't there yet. And so I think, one thing the biotech industry in the Bay Area does is they do have that experience of going from that sort of scale up period, from the medium-sized company to the big company, and the pieces that go. I think one challenge, of course, in in the Bay Area is, you know, that as great as the people are and things are, we're not all over the world, and we're not as close to all of the growth markets in the world as we can. And I think one thing that Singapore offers is it's extremely well placed for where a lot of the certainly demand for new things in the 21st century are going to be, but also where a lot of the new ideas are going to be. And rather than competing or trying to take market share from each other, I think developing good ideas, finding ways to commercialize them effectively, building those relationships that I think Jeffrey really spoke quite eloquently about. That's what it's all about.
Cool. So David, I have a back to our original question, which is, where are we going with this? Now, this is a bit of an unfair question in some ways, because we were talking about the conference on June 30th and kind of where should we go with it. And it was like, I got schooled. It was a menu of like a million areas. But if you could take that half-hour-long conversation, David, and encapsulate it in a few minutes, it would be great. What are we looking at?
Go through, yeah, the very much abbreviated view in light of the time. I mean, I've been learning from my colleagues very much so about trends within the industry as a whole and international trends. Maybe I'll just offer, just to complement that, scientific trends looking ahead, you know, areas in which I think there's a lot of opportunity. As Jeffrey mentioned, there are a lot of new technologies that have been coming out that have resulted in acceleration in the rate of progress. And a lot of these revolve around data. You know, we obviously know that we're in the era of big data, and this has arrived big time within the biotech industry. Everywhere from, you know, molecular data, sequencing data, where Bay Area companies made major innovations that make it possible to sequence many human genomes per experimental run now, all the way through, you know, patient data, where healthcare systems are beginning to recognize what an incredible repository of information all the digital healthcare records represent, that, you know, can be mined to be able to make better healthcare decisions. So that's, you know, represents a confluence of two major strengths in the Bay Area as well, which is biotech and tech. So I think that as you begin to merge machine learning, AI, big data with biotech, we're naturally poised to really leverage the two of them and to synergize them.
Okay, so this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, a preview of things to come. I really want to thank you all, and I'm going to turn it back to Darlene, but thank you all for really, I thought, a fascinating set of insights from everybody. Darlene, over to you.
Yep, and thanks again. That was such an amazing conversation today. So again, I want to say thank you to Bruce for moderating such an amazing panel, to Enterprise Singapore and OEWD for your partnership and support. Thank you to our speakers, Delon To, Mark Chandler, Jack Chalice, Jeffrey Lucia, right? And Dr. David Schaefer. And with that, I hope that today's program was informative. I know I learned a lot, and that you are now keen to come to San Francisco to join our new bioeconomy ecosystem, as I like to call it now. It's a bioeconomy. There's so many different verticals. So come and join our ecosystem. Come visit us, take part in our Select USA San Francisco spinoff on June 30th. Or let us know when you will be coming to San Francisco. The link is in chat. We will be sharing today's recording with our attendees via email at a later date. And so please stay in touch. Sign up for our newsletters or check out our website at www.globalsf.biz for more information on our activities and services as well, because we are here to help you land and help you thrive in San Francisco, the Bay Area, or contact us, GlobalSF, at info@globalsf.biz. We look forward to welcoming you to San Francisco and working with you. Thank you now, and have a good day. Bye-bye.